20 contractor vehicles sat trapped behind a locked gate before breakfast, and the woman who put them there was about to lose control of the entire HOA process. No emergency, no police tape, no accident, just 20 vehicles lined up on land that didn't belong to them. By 9:47 that morning, board members were making phone calls they never expected to make. Contractors were standing idle behind steel bars, and a decision that had taken one woman less than 5 minutes to make was already unraveling in front of an entire neighborhood. The strange part? The homeowner hasn't raised his voice once. Now, before I tell you how 20 vehicles ended up trapped on private property, I want you to keep one thing in your head the entire time I tell this story. The gate. A heavy wrought iron gate with a padlock that had been hanging in the same place for years. I'll tell you exactly why that gate changed the balance of power in this neighborhood before this story is over. And if you think you've already figured it out, trust me, you're missing the part that made an entire HOA board rethink how it operated. Subscribe now, because stories like this never start where they end. But first, you need to understand how that gate ended up there in the first place. The property wasn't a condo, it wasn't a townhouse, it was land. A corner lot in central Virginia with mature trees, a long gravel stretch running beside the fence line, and mornings so quiet you could hear birds before the sun cleared the rooftops. The homeowner had spent 3 decades working supply chain jobs before retiring. He left the city, bought the property, maintained every section himself, cleared the gravel by hand when needed, repaired the fencing, and installed that wrought iron gate years earlier. He wasn't bothering anyone. No complaints, no neighborhood feuds. He mostly kept to himself. And for a long time that worked. Then one Tuesday morning, someone decided his property belonged to the community. The HOA secretary was named Diane, mid-50s, perfectly organized, clipboard in hand. So often, it looked like part of her wardrobe. The kind of person who could spot a rule violation from across the street and somehow remember it 3 weeks later. Most residents tolerated her. Then the letters started. One homeowner received a notice about a trash can being visible for 37 minutes after pickup day. Another got a warning because a basketball hoop remained in the driveway overnight. The property owner on the corner lot got one too. A formal compliance notice regarding a garden hose. Not whether it leaked, not where it was stored, the color. According to the letter, the shade of green was inconsistent with community appearance standards. He read it, folded it once, and dropped it in a kitchen drawer. He planned to deal with it later. He never did. That was a small mistake. Because Diane had spent years learning that most people eventually complied, and she had started believing they always would. Then came Tuesday, 6:15 in the morning, coffee in hand, cool air. A routine that had looked exactly the same for years. The first vehicle didn't seem strange. The second barely registered. The third was sitting on the gravel. The fourth was deeper inside. Then came the pickup truck with the landscaping company's magnetic logo on the E. Door, then another, then another, then another. By the time he reached the edge of the lot, 20 vehicles were parked in a perfect line across private property. Not near it. On it. Every space deliberately chosen. Every vehicle positioned like someone had planned the arrangement hours earlier. He called Diane. The explanation arrived immediately. Overflow parking for a community landscaping project. Temporary. Practical. Already arranged. No call. No knock. No permission. Just arranged. He stood there listening, while contractors stepped out of trucks carrying clipboards, coffee cups, and equipment cases. His gravel lot, community use. His property, someone else's decision. And then he noticed something else. The vehicles were all inside the fenced section. Every single one. The landscaping crew, the supervisors, the company trucks, all of them. The coffee stopped halfway to his mouth, because suddenly the situation looked very different. The gate was closed. The gate was locked. And every vehicle Diane had confidently directed onto private property was sitting behind it. That's when the morning stopped being about parking and started becoming a problem. The gate had been there for years. Black wrought iron, heavy hinges, a steel padlock installed when the property owner first moved in. Most people never paid attention to it. That morning, it became the only thing that mattered. He walked back toward the fence line and looked at the row of vehicles sitting quietly behind it. Contractor trucks, pickup trucks, crew vehicles, 20 in total. Every one of them had entered private property without the permission of the person who owned it, and every one of them needed that gate to leave. A contractor approached first. "Sir, we're supposed to be working on the landscaping project today." The homeowner nodded. "So I've heard." The contractor glanced toward the lock, then back at the vehicles, then back at the lock again. The realization arrived slowly. Nobody on the crew had a key. Nobody at the landscaping company had a key. And apparently nobody at the HOA had bothered to ask who did. A few minutes later, the phone started ringing. Then it rang again. Then again. The property manager arrived. Then a board member. Then another phone call. What began as a parking plan was now forcing people to ask a much larger question. Who had actually authorized the use of private property? And more importantly, who had verified they had the authority to do it? By mid-morning, the answers coming back were creating far more trouble than the locked gate ever had. Now, you'd think the HOA would apologize. You'd think. Instead, Diane doubled down. She insisted the gravel lot had been used informally by contractors before. She argued that temporary community access justified the decision. She even suggested that locking the gate was creating unnecessary disruption for neighborhood operations. That statement lasted exactly one board meeting. Because the HOA's own records started arriving. No vote authorizing contractor parking. No easement granting community access. No written permission from the property owner. No board resolution. Nothing. What existed instead was a trail of emails showing that Diane had approved the arrangement herself. One signature, one decision, one very expensive mistake. The power dynamic shifted immediately. Board members who had spent the morning defending the situation were now asking how it had happened in the first place. The homeowner never raised his voice. He never threatened anyone. He simply left the gate exactly where it had always been. And that was the problem. The vehicles couldn't leave. The contractors couldn't work. The landscaping schedule collapsed. Every hour the situation continued. More people were forced to acknowledge the same reality. The HOA had treated private property like community property, and now everyone could see the difference. That's when Diane finally realized the gate was never the obstacle. The ownership was. The situation ended faster than it began. Before the week was over, the vehicles were removed. The contractor's schedule was rewritten, and the board issued a formal acknowledgement that the gravel lot was private property, with no community access rights attached to it. The parking plan disappeared. The policy disappeared. And so did Diane's authority over contractor operations. The board voted to require written approval for any future use of private property connected to HOA projects. Every request, every contractor, every location, no exceptions. That alone would have been enough. But the collateral damage came afterward. Neighbors started asking questions. Board members reviewed old decisions. Contractors demanded written authorization before accepting HOA instructions. A process that had once depended on one person's assumptions now required documentation. The system changed because it had to. A few weeks later, the homeowner walked the property line the same way he always had. The gravel remained where it had been, the fence remained where it had been, and the wrought iron gate remained exactly where it had been for years. Only one thing was different. Everyone knew who controlled it. The following weekend, he opened the gate, drove through it, and locked it again behind him. Nothing dramatic, no audience, no speech, just a small action that suddenly meant something very different. Because ownership only matters when someone forgets it. And some fights aren't really about parking spaces. They're about making sure the people giving orders remember where their authority ends. The gate never changed. The rules did. If you made it to the end, you already know why stories like this keep happening. Subscribe, because the next HOA battle makes this one look like a warning shot.